Wait, before you scroll past this, listen. There's a moment happening right now, maybe tonight, maybe it already happened earlier this week, where the person who was supposed to walk into your future did something they can't take back. And I need you to hear what actually unfolded, because the version you reimagining in your head isn't quite right. It happened at a small table, not a restaurant, somewhere quieter than that. A friend's kitchen, late evening, the kind of light that makes everything feel softer than it is. There were 3 of them sitting there. Your person, a mutual friend, and someone else, someone who knew just enough about you to be dangerous in that conversation. And then your name came up. Not gently, not in passing. It came up in a sentence that had an edge to it, a sentence designed to test how your person would respond. And they, the one who was supposed to be in your future, they didn't defend you. They didn't correct the story. They sat there, and they let it happen. They added a sentence of their own. A small one. But it was enough. That's the terrible thing. It wasn't a betrayal in the loud sense. It wasn't an affair or a lie or a cruelty you recognize from a movie. It was something smaller, and somehow worse, a moment where they had the chance to stand for you, and they chose comfort instead. They chose not to make the room uncomfortable. They chose the easier version of themselves, and the universe noted it. Now, let me pull back for a second, because if you re-watching this, something in you already knows what I am describing. You felt the shift in the air over the last few days. You felt a strange heaviness, a quiet that doesn't quite feel like peace. You weren't imagining it. Something happened on their side. You felt the echo of it before you understood what it was. This is what I want to walk you through, slowly, the way it really unfolded. Because there's more to this than the moment itself, and what comes after, what's beginning to happen on their side right now, is the part you actually need to hear. So let me set the scene properly. It was a Tuesday evening, or close to it. The kind of mid-week night when nothing important is supposed to happen. Your person had been invited over almost as an afterthought. A quick text, come by if you around, nothing planned. They went because they didn't want to be alone with their own thoughts. That's important. They were already restless before they walked in. Something about you had been sitting in their chest all week, and they didn't have a name for it yet. The kitchen smelled like coffee that had been on the burner too long. There was music playing low, something instrumental, the kind of thing you put on when you not really listening. The friend was washing a dish. The other person, the one I call the third voice, was leaning against the counter with a glass in their hand. And then, casually, the third voice said your name. Not your full name, just enough. A nickname, maybe. A reference. The kind of mention that makes everyone in the room straighten up a little because they know it matters. Your person froze. Just for a second. Just long enough that the friend at the sink noticed. But then they recovered, the way people recover when they don't want to be seen flinching, and they reached for their drink, and the conversation kept going. The third voice said something like, I heard things ended weird there. Or maybe, I always thought that one was a little intense. I am paraphrasing, because the exact words don't matter. What matters is the tone. It was the tone of someone who wanted permission to talk about you, and your person gave it to them. Not with a yes. With silence. With a small laugh that didn't reach their eyes. With a sentence that started with, yeah, well. And trailed off into something dismissive. They didn't say anything cruel. That's the thing. They didn't have to. The not defending was the betrayal. And in that exact moment, something inside them split. Because they heard themselves. They heard the cheapness of their own voice. They heard the version of themselves that you wouldn't have recognized. The one who softens around the wrong people. Who lets other people's framing of you become their framing too. And for the rest of the night, they couldn't get warm. Have you ever felt that, in your own life? The moment you do something small and you know, instantly, in your bones, that you just stepped out of alignment with yourself? That's what they were sitting in. They smiled. They nodded. They finished their drink. But underneath the surface, something had gone very quiet. And when they got into their car later, they sat in the driver's seat for a long time before turning the key. If this message is finding you at the right moment, comment, I receive this love, like the video, and subscribe, there's more coming for you. Now here's where it deepens. Because most people would assume that the moment in the kitchen was the worst part. It wasn't. The worst part was the drive home, and the night that followed, and what they tried to do with their hands. They drove with the radio off. That's not a small detail. This is someone who never drives in silence. Silence is the thing they usually avoid, because silence is where you live in their head. But that night, they couldn't bring themselves to turn it on. They didn't want a song to do something to them. They didn't want a lyric to ambush them. So they drove in the quiet, with the road sounds, and the streetlights passing over their face in slow rhythms. And the intrusive thought came, why did hearing her name from someone else hit like that? Just that. One sentence, lodged in the middle of their chest. They tried to push it away. They turned onto their street. They parked. They sat. They eventually went inside. But here's the thing about thoughts like that. You can ignore them at the door. You can't ignore them at 3 in the morning. They went to bed early, which was unusual. They lay there with their phone in their hand, scrolling through nothing, the screen lighting up their face in that pale blue way. And without meaning to, without planning it, without wanting to, their thumb did the thing. The small navigational instinct that travels faster than conscious thought. They typed the first letter of your name. Just one letter. In the search bar of an app they hadn't opened in weeks. They didn't press anything. They didn't search. They didn't look at your profile. But the cursor blinked there, waiting, for almost a full minute. And then they closed the app and put the phone face down on the nightstand. That counts. I want you to understand that that counts. The almost action is its own kind of confession. The unsent message that almost got typed. The name that almost got searched. The voice memo they almost recorded and didn't send. These are the small, private rooms where people admit things they would never admit out loud. And in that moment, you were in the room with them. Not physically, but fully. Now, here's the part where I have to be honest with you about something. What they did at that kitchen table wasn't a single bad decision. It was the latest in a small pattern. There have been other moments you didn't see, where they minimized you to other people. Not because they didn't care, but because caring about you required a kind of courage they hadn't grown into yet. And every time they failed that small test, a part of them kept the receipt. The receipts have been adding up. That's why this particular moment hit so hard. It wasn't a fresh wound. It was the wound that finally got opened. The one their nervous system had been quietly archiving for months. This is the part most people miss in these stories. We always want the betrayal to be a single bolt of lightning. It usually isn't. It's usually a slow accumulation that one ordinary Tuesday finally tips over. And on their side, right now, there is a person sitting with the full weight of that accumulation for the first time. The next morning, they tried to act normal. They made coffee. They answered work messages. They opened their laptop and stared at the screen for 40 minutes without typing anything. The day moved around them like water moves around a stone. They were there, but they weren't. A song came on at some point, playing somewhere, in a coffee shop, in a friend's car, I don't know exactly where. But it was a song that used to mean something between you. Or close enough. Close enough that their chest tightened, and they had to look out a window for a moment to compose themselves. This is what I mean when I say the universe was noting things. Because the next thing that happened, and this is the part one really need you to hear, wasn't internal. It was external. It was the second event. The one that pushed everything into a different gear. 2 days later, the third voice, the one from the kitchen, the one who had said your name with that edge, reached out to your person directly. A message. Not long, but pointed. It said something like, "Hey, by the way, I think I owe you a heads up. I ran into her recently and I might have given you the wrong impression the other night. She didn't say those things the way I made it sound. I was being unfair. Just wanted you to know." I am paraphrasing again. But the substance is real. The third voice walked back what they said. They admitted that the framing in the kitchen wasn't fair. That they been editorializing. That the picture they painted of you was thinner and meaner than the truth. And your person read that message and felt the floor move under them. Because in that moment, the math reversed. Suddenly the conversation in the kitchen wasn't just a moment they had failed. It was a moment they had failed based on a story that wasn't even true. They had stayed quiet about someone they loved, in defense of a narrative that the narrator was now retracting. That's a different kind of weight. You can sit with regret when you think the story was accurate. It's harder when you find out the story was wrong, and you didn't have the strength to question it in the moment. You stayed silent for a version of someone that didn't exist. They read the message 3 times. Then they put their phone down. Then they walked outside without a jacket and stood on the small patch of sidewalk in front of their building, and just breathed, because their chest had gone tight in a way they didn't know what to do with. Did you feel a shift in the air on your end, around that same time? Some people have. A sudden warmth, a strange clarity, a thought of them that arrived out of nowhere and lingered longer than usual. That wasn't random. That was the moment the lie about you fell apart in someone else's hand. And here's what they did next. They went back inside. They sat at their kitchen table, their own kitchen this time, not the friends. They opened a notes app, and they started writing something. Not to send, just to think. They wrote your name first. Then they crossed it out. Then they wrote it again. Then they wrote a sentence that started with, "I should have said something when." And they couldn't finish it. This is what I want you to hold on to. Because somewhere in your week, somewhere in your ordinary running of errands and answering of texts and going to sleep at a reasonable hour, this was happening. Without your knowledge. Without your permission. Without you having to do a single thing. You don't have to chase what's choosing you back. If this resonates, let it settle in you. Don't rush past it. Now, there's still the question of what they did wrong, and whether it's the kind of thing that gets repaired. I want to speak to that, because I don't want to leave you with a soft answer when you came here for an honest one. What they did was real. It was a failure of nerve. It was a moment where they should have said your name with respect and they didn't. That's not nothing. That doesn't get erased by a follow-up message from the third voice. And it shouldn't. But here's the thing about people who are actually meant to be in your life. They not the ones who never fail. They the ones who can sit with their failure honestly and let it change them. The ones who don't run from it. The ones who don't perform a recovery to make themselves feel better, but who actually do the slow work of becoming someone who wouldn't make that mistake again. And that's the work they in right now. It's not glamorous. It's not the kind of redemption arc that makes a good movie. It's just a person sitting at a table, trying to be honest with themselves, in a small room, with a notes app open and no audience to perform for. That's what real change looks like. It's quiet. It's awkward. It's lonely. They in that loneliness right now. The loneliness of having understood something too late, but not so late that nothing can be done. The loneliness of wanting to reach out and not knowing what they allowed to say. The loneliness of realizing that you, the person they wronged in a small way, are also the person who knows them best, and they can't even use that knowing because they have to earn the right to it back. There's an old line, let your speech always be with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer every one. It comes to mind here, because the answer they trying to find for you isn't going to be a paragraph or a poem. It's going to be one sentence, said carefully, when the time is right. They working on what that sentence is. You can feel that work, even from a distance. That's part of why you felt unsettled this week. You weren't being haunted. You were being held in someone else's process of becoming worthy of you again. I know that sounds like a lot to receive, so just take what fits. But I'll tell you what I see. I see a person who is no longer going to be casual about the way your name leaves their mouth. I see a person who has been quietly humiliated by their own behavior, and who has decided, without telling anyone, that they don't want to be the kind of person who does that again. I see a small turn, not a dramatic one, a small, durable one, the kind that actually lasts, and I see them, in the next few days, doing something they haven't done in a long time, not necessarily reaching out, they may not be ready for that, but preparing themselves to reach out, cleaning up the parts of their life they let go of, putting their phone down earlier, sleeping better, reading something that reminds them of who they want to be when they finally do speak to you. This is the part the universe was waiting for. Because contact, when it comes, has to come from a person who has done the inner work. Not from a person panicking. Not from a person lonely. Not from a person scared of losing you. From a person who has genuinely sat with what they did and chosen to be different. You wouldn't have wanted them back any other way. You know that. And if you, sitting with this and thinking, but what about me, what do I do? The answer is the most ordinary thing in the world. Keep living. Keep going to bed at a reasonable hour. Keep answering your texts. Keep showing up for the people in front of you. Don't perform a transformation. Don't punish yourself for thinking about them. Don't feel pressured to feel anything specific. You are allowed to be a person in the middle of a normal week while something extraordinary moves on your behalf in another city. That's how this kind of thing works. Not loudly, not on your timeline, but with a steadiness you can lean against. One more thing, before we close. The kitchen, the one with the coffee burning and the music low and the third voice with the edge in their words, that room doesn't exist anymore. Not the way it did. Something happened in that room that closed a chapter neither person knew was a chapter. And the next time your name comes up in a room your person is sitting in, they are going to be a different version of themselves. Quieter, steadier, less afraid of the discomfort of standing for someone they love. You did that. without doing anything, just by being who you are, and letting their absence of you teach them what their presence with you used to feel like. That's a kind of power you don't have to wield. You only have to trust. So tonight, when you put your phone down and the room gets quiet and you wonder, for half a second, whether all of this is real, let me tell you what's real. A person, somewhere, is sitting with the weight of having underestimated you. They not running from it. They not numbing it. They letting it shape them. And what they beginning to realize now, is something they can't walk away from anymore. Not this time.